What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Tequila Tuesday from Scotty's Little Sales Club, brought to you by Sendoso, our official sending partner and sponsor of Scotty's Little Sales Club and Tequila Tuesday. We're going to start off today's show with James's suggestion that I now bring out multiple bottles of tequila for every show moving forward and allow everybody to vote on which one I should drink. And we ad-libbed a little bit. We came up with something on the fly thanks to my man, Steven. Steven said all of them is the answer, and he's probably right. So it's more like, which tequila should I drink first is what we're going to do. So thanks for joining us. We got a loaded August. I think every single week we've got a guest except for 1 week, perhaps. We've got 5 or 6 guests lined up in August and early September. The first one tonight, I'm super excited to talk to. James Kaikis and I have known each other via LinkedIn for a few years now, back when he was a sales engineer at Salesforce. And through Thursday Night Sales and other stuff like that, we started having some conversations. And he kind of hit upon this idea to build a community for his world of sales engineers and pre-sales, solutions architect, and he'll get into it, but there's 9,000 different titles for people in that role. So he went and did that, and I talk all the time about trying to shrink the delta between idea and action. And from my perspective, I don't know if James agrees that he went pretty fast, but he went pretty fast in my mind from this idea to building this community. And the community is blown up and it's massive. It's one of the most powerful ones out there. He's doing a great job. He's created courses around how to become certified, and I'll let him, talk about all that. But it's James Kaikis from the PreSales Collective is our guest, talking about sales engineering, pre-sales, and what the hell is it, and how to work with them, and how to make them a special part of your sales process. So, James, I'll get out of the way and give it over to you, man.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Scott. I appreciate the kind words. I appreciate all your support and advice that you've given me throughout the years. So, hey, everyone, I'm honored to be here. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. I've been following along Scott and what he's been doing for quite some time. And as he mentioned, I started a group called the PreSales Collective, which I'll just highlight momentarily. But for us, there's so many resources out there for sales and marketing, but there's this role, like Scott said, that has so many different titles. No one even knows what it does. So things are changing. So today's session, we'll give you a little bit of brief introduction on who I am, right? And why I'm here to speak about this role in this profession. Talk to you, actually do a little interaction, find out what you know about solutions, understand the audience a little bit too, talk about the role, and then kind of the shift that's happening. You probably see a lot of this content out there around this shift, but we're going to talk about how and why it relates to this profession, and probably why this profession is blossoming right now to support you as sales folks in your day-to-day. And then, got some takeaways. Let's keep it conversational. I got a lot of slides. I'll go through some of them pretty fast, some pretty quickly. You could just message in the chat, use whatever you need to. I'm happy to have an open line of dialogue. But my goal is for you to walk away from today's conversation with a better understanding of this role, of this profession, and how it can help you close business, because that's really what it's about, what it's for. Because it's being recorded too, I just want to highlight this is a view from my lens and a number of our community members have actually taken some of the slides and narratives from presentations that have happened around the PreSales Collective. So just want to give that quick highlight. So who's James Kaikis? Who am I? Just quickly, it's Tequila Tuesday, so I had to put my favorite tequila on here. So I'm a big fan of 1942. Don't have any today. I know Scott does, but I poured myself some añejo from a friend. So I definitely am engaging in the tequila spirit on Tuesday.
I love that. I love when the guest shows up with a special tequila just for the occasion.
I told Scott that this was given as a gift, and I've been waiting for the right opportunity to utilize it. So today's it. My background's actually in hospitality and operations. So I used to work in hotels. And I used to work in athletics, and I took my subject matter expertise from hotels and went into hospitality tech, where I was in implementation and actually the first sales engineer at a company, and then first sales engineer at a second company. And then I went to, after the 2 startups of both Revenate and Showpad, I went to Salesforce really to learn enterprise and learn the complex complexity of this profession and of sales. And then we started the PreSales Collective when the pandemic happened, and about a year later, I went full time. So it's been an awesome journey, and now I'm full time on the PreSales Collective and PreSales Academy. Just to highlight what those are really quickly, is the PreSales Collective is a global profession or community for this profession. I mean, really, that's all it is. We focus on people who want to get into sales engineering, solutions consulting, individuals, leaders, executives, because we're trying to provide resources to what we like to call an overutilized and under-resourced profession. And so that's really why we exist. And we're about 25,000 members now across the globe. And then we started
hold on, say that number one more time so it really sinks in with everybody.
25,000 members across the globe.
And you started it when?
A little over about 2.5 years ago. And we don't do any outbound marketing. It's all inbound.
Yeah. So as frame of reference, that's about 10x the size of the Thursday Night Sales Slack channel, and about the total number of participants, unique participants who've come to Thursday Night Sales. So just for some perspective out there of how James is taking over the world with PreSales Collective. Well done.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Scott. I mean, the reality is that like this profession has existed, which I'm going to talk about, but there's just been no resources for it. And people have talked about doing it forever, and we just did it. Good timing with the pandemic and a focus on execution. And then we actually started last year a boot camp, PreSales Academy. So we've actually helped almost 100 people break into pre-sales and change their career. We actually had a teacher quadruple her salary recently too. So that's fun win stories to help people change their trajectory and change their career. That's all I wanted to highlight from my background. But it's actually a really interesting time in pre-sales, right? We're trying to get rid of this maybe term pre-sales, even though it's called PreSales Collective, and really focus on the term solutions. You've probably seen products like DemoStack and Reprise and Consensus, and these Walnut, these products popping up, and a lot of them, their main use case is pre-sales professionals or solutions professionals. And over just the last couple of years, we've seen over 400 million in venture capital poured into this role. Might I add you, it was like zero 4 years ago. So there's just kind of been this ecosystem that's forming around this role, and community, podcasts, resources to support the people in the day-to-day. So it's just a great time to be a solutions professional. And then today I'm going to take you on a little bit of
James, quick question for you. Sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
Do you have to be a current pre-sales professional in order to join the PreSales Collective?
Great question. You do not have to be in the role. You can join and learn. I would say for account executives or sales executives, a lot of them find value in understanding like what people care about in the role, what great looks like, which I want to talk about today. So yeah, we want the more the merrier, right? We're trying to raise more awareness to this profession. Thanks for asking that question. And if you remember from our podcast, I'm only allowed to say great question one time, and I just used it.
So you hit your quota in the first 10 minutes. Good job.
I did last time too, Scott. Good job. All right, just a quick, just humor me for a minute here. If you don't mind taking your phone out and just grabbing a quick screenshot of this. I promise it will be quick. If you don't have your phone, I'm going to show you the next slide that has like a Slido code.
Hold on, give us a second here. We're all scrambling.
It's right here. It's right here on this slide. It's a little bit easier.
I love this. First ever QR code.
Yes.
Shout out to my man, John Stern, who's going through some stuff, but the king of the QR code, John Stern would be proud.
This is like a specialty pre-sales thing. So I just got 3 questions that I'm going to ask folks. You can either scan the QR code or go to this URL. Can I just maybe get some thumbs up or head nods if you're there? This code will be on the... Is it not working?
Oh, it's working. I just dropped a question.
Cool. All right. So the first one is I just want to know what your role is, right? Because as a good pre-sales professional, I need to make sure I'm tailoring my message to my audience today, right? So some of you, which you'll see momentarily, just want to know who's all in the audience.
This is already my favorite episode ever.
You got to do disco. You got to know your audience.
It's great.
Right?
Yeah.
You know your audience. Okay, cool. I appreciate that. Awesome. Nice mix of crews. If anyone's in the other, do you mind just posting in the chat so I know what other?
That's me. Well, I put other.
Cool.
I didn't know what to put for myself.
Yeah,
So
I think Scott, you're another.
founder.
Yeah, founder, other. Yep. I see customer success. Awesome. Love that. Cool. Next question is, have you ever worked with a solutions consultant or a sales engineer before? Right. Scott had said we had a crew that was maybe mixed. Okay.
Look at that. I'm actually pretty surprised that it's more yes than no. I'm in the no category, by the way. I never had this department, nor sold where we had people in that particular, officially in that particular role.
Officially, yeah. And Scott, we talked about this a little bit on the podcast, right?
Yeah.
Is that, I fundamentally believe that this should be an earlier hire because, I'll get into it. Sales is just really hard,
Yeah. And learning from you agree, because the last product that I sold, Qualia, is like super technical, and we could have used somebody in this particular role, and I just didn't know any better. 2016, there was no pre-sales collective, James.
That's why we're here. All right, great to see 64%. And then this is what I'm actually really looking forward to seeing is, can you just describe this role in a few words? No right or wrong answers. It's anonymous. Just help me out here real quick. Because as we've mentioned, there's just so many titles for this profession. It's called different things. It's got different functions in different organizations. And we'll talk about what great looks like today. Nice. Technical product, skill set. No idea. Sorry, that's why I'm here. I love that. Blocking barriers for sales, demos, help sales product. Awesome.
I don't know how you built this, but we're gonna have to have a conversation after.
I'll help you. It's called Slido, but I'll follow.
We use Slido on Thursday Night Sales, but I use the term use loosely because Amy and I are, we might as well be like novices when it comes to technology.
It's all right. I like to start our meetings with these types of things because it just really helps. So I appreciate everyone giving your responses. That's really the main engagement I have today. Cool. Thanks, everybody. So I just want to give a brief history of the role before we start talking a little bit more about what the role is. It's kind of funny, right? If you ask people like where this role came from, there's some urban myths and some urban legends about the profession. They say that a salesperson, a very savvy salesperson, was walking the floors of IBM and had a really big meeting and grabbed a product manager and said, "I need you to join this customer meeting." And the product manager discussed everything about the product, and they're like, "Wow, this actually really helps." And rumor has it that either at IBM and Oracle, this started to become how it functioned in enterprise sales. And especially back in the days of hardware, solutions engineers, I've actually heard some people, these called the associate system specialists. That says ASS, is the ASS, the associate system specialist. True story. I actually talked to the guy about it today. Was the role, and they would like come and grab servers and mainframes and like bring them to customer on-sites and do technical integrations and implementations while the salesperson helped sell the deal. And it started to work and started to gain some traction. And so that's why you heard this term sales engineer. And it actually is stuck for quite some time. You see that term used a lot, but I will tell you that I don't like the term sales engineer because sometimes people who are great fits for this role, they hear sales, they get a little deterred, and then engineer is a deterrent as well. So you actually started to see a growth in this solutions engineer, solutions consulting role with the growth of SaaS. As we all know, I mean, there's hybrid sales, it's in person, it's virtual. What we ask of our organizations ask of salespeople today is just a lot. It's just so much. We're asking you to do so many different things. And when you look at co-selling, having someone who's this product expert or the person who does the demo and understands the value can be a great resource, right? And this is why we fundamentally believe that this role is really pivotal to the future of sales, which I'll highlight momentarily. But SaaS changed everything because it was no longer like sell it and forget it. Things were in the cloud. The role of sales was changing, right? And so you kind of had this like idea of co-selling and two heads is better than one. And in turn came the sales engineer, solutions engineer. And as we kind of mentioned, like solutions, what sales engineer, I mean, even for us, like even for people who are in the profession, it's confusing. It really is. And like, that's actually what we're on a bit of a mission to do, is to change things and to clarify things in the profession. Hopefully another first. This was from Scott's post today. I wanted to get some quotes from the field, some stories from the field.
I love this. Just making the presentation on the fly.
Mm-hmm. That's what we do.
This morning, I mean, these two. By the way, James Lipton is a friend of mine, and I screenshotted this slide right here, and I was like, "Listen, you just made a presentation." He was pretty happy.
It's awesome. I mean, it's true, right? And if you actually see what folks are saying here, right? It's really important to understand how this role, when utilized effectively, can be a major revenue driver, right? Can really help influence business and change business. And reality is, like, too many organizations for too long kind of put this role in a box, right? I was looking when we asked, what is this word? You hear a lot of technical, you hear a lot sometimes nerdy, right? It's a person who is just like knows the product but can't sell. Like, the reality is that doesn't exist anymore, and it can exist. In some organizations it does, but it needs to change. Like, these people are your co-pilots in sales, and they're there to help you hit your quota. Sometimes they're on quota, sometimes they're not. And, you know, there are so many titles. So today we're going to just kind of simplify the titles here momentarily. We did a survey. I think we had 27 or 28 titles that were acceptable. And so this is our top, I think this is our top 10, but we're kind of moving with the top 4. Sales engineer is kind of the historic name for the profession. Solutions engineer is really common. Solutions consultant is actually becoming the most popular, because engineer is a protected class in multiple countries around the world, right? So if you're running a team, you can't actually call someone an engineer unless they have certain credentials. And then the term solutions architect. This is a word that sometimes a term that's kind of interused. But a lot of times it's used in post-sale and implementation. But as we continue to define the profession at the PreSales Collective, these are the 4 terms that we're mainly using. And I will tell you, if you want to spark a debate with a sales engineer or a solutions consultant, ask them what the title should be. Like, some of our best performing content has just been asking people what the title should be, and like fights.
So people feel real passionate one way or the other.
Yeah, they do. And, you know, I'm not entirely sure why, but I will say that we are about to take a stand and put some content out there about like what it should be, which is why you'll see me use kind of solutions instead of pre-sales, because this moniker of pre-sales, like the reality of SaaS, is like this role, solutions engineering, solutions consulting, works in post-sale. It is unlocked in growth and renewal and expansion. Right. And the reality is we have to kind of change it.
You're gonna have to change the name of your community. You got a branding problem now.
Yeah, I know. I'm actually, what I told somebody is I hope that's a problem that I have to have. So we'll see. But just for today, I wanted to highlight these terms for everybody. We're going to use mostly solutions consultant, solutions engineer. And I just grabbed a couple slides from our PreSales Academy that talk about fundamentally what this role is. And when we're taking career changers, right, and we say like, what are some of the things you need to be a good solutions engineer, is ask questions. Like, this role is very curious. They understand, they want to dig, right? You want to dig to be able to tailor conversations. You need to be able to showcase product. Like, at the end of the day, like, that's one of the most important things that you do is showcase product. And it's not just like point and click, it's being able to tell stories and be able to convey value, and letting that person that you're speaking to realize that their life is going to be so much better when they utilize your software. They're going to get home to their family on time. They're going to hit their bonus. They're going to get their weekends back. Like, that's the ideal state of a solutions engineer. And asking some technical questions, because the reality is that when you sell software, it's got to work in the tech stack. And then product feedback. This is actually what some people do really, really well, is sales is selling deals. You hear somebody say, I need to have this to close this deal. I need this to buy your software. Well, the solutions team should be able to take that feedback and go back to product and quantify it, because it also helps product innovation. And, you know, this role, this is just some content for PreSales Academy, just the level set. We talk about that technical sales as being empathetic and persuasive, resilient, and connecting confidently with others. And on the side, you hear effective communication, project management, curiosity, reliability, efficiency, problem solving. These are just some of the skills of the best solutions engineers that you'll come by. And lastly, just to highlight like what we at PreSales Academy teach, right? Imagine we're taking a teacher, we're taking a professor, we're taking a gym manager, people who work insurance, and teaching them this profession. So we're kind of teaching them the role, we're teaching them sales process, discovery, preparation, demonstration, and how to present, right? They got to be able to present.
I have a question for you here, James.
Sure.
Let's say I'm not in this profession, nor do I necessarily want to go fully that direction. Let's say I'm an SDR, or an AE, or a sales manager, or a VP of sales even.
Sure.
Can you talk about the value of going through this course, for lack of a better term, and learning more about these things? Like, how does that help me in my job if I'm an AE, or if I'm a sales leader, to understand this stuff? And after you answer that, maybe we'll go to Emma, who's got a question.
Yeah. So to Emma's question, product specialist is a title that falls into this profession. I've actually hired some product specialists who've turned into solutions engineer. And Scott, I think for what we want to accomplish today is show what best looks like. There are too many organizations. So imagine yourself, right? You're early stage VP, you got a couple salespeople, you're growing your org, and you realize like, hey, my salespeople aren't super technical, right? Or maybe their discovery is decent. It could be better, but we've got some folks all over the place with demonstration skills and presentation skills. This defines like what great should look like in this role, because this role is changing and evolving, and I'll talk about that momentarily. But it's good for anyone who works with this role or works with this profession to understand what they should be doing, because there's too many organizations that just pay these people a lot of money to be like demo jockeys, as they call them, or demo dollies, where all they do is get on calls and do demonstrations, and there's no value to that.
Yeah. I feel like if I was still an operator, and you could challenge me on this and be like, you should still learn more about it, even in what you do. I feel like if I was still an operator as a VP of sales, it would behoove me to go through something like this and learn about all these roles and improve my own skill set, and then be able to take that information and optimize how I implement it in my org, who I hire, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so I would agree with you. So this right here is mostly for people who are trying to make the career change, but this is something that I'm trying to focus on later into this year, into next year, is educating sales leaders what this role actually means, so they can unlock the power. Because again, at the end of the day, it's about revenue and revenue generation. And so this role can really help in that, which I'm going to highlight. And Carolyn, I see that there's a question about channel partner sales. Let me tell you that channel partner sales is one of these highly debated topics within the profession, because a lot of people just don't know what to do here. But there are some organizations that have some really fantastic channel partner sales organizations. We've done some events and some content on that. I'm happy to dive into that maybe at the end of today's presentation, if that's okay. Cool. Thank you. Yes. All right, so I'm gonna go quickly into a couple more things about what this role is before we start talking about why it's important and why you should be aware of it. So defining this role, right? Again, what we're really trying to focus on is solutions. This person has to be curious and ask good questions. They've got to have great communication skills, right? With you and sales, with your prospect, with your product team, with your marketing team, and they are trustworthy. And that's going to be a common term that we see a lot. And you actually saw in the feedback from the field, right? If you actually read Scott's post today, a lot of people were talking about trust as the pre-sales person. That an account executive and a solutions engineer could say the same thing, but it's viewed differently by the end individual. And that's what we want to hone in on. They have to be value oriented. They got to be innovative, right? You got to be able to think creatively to close deals. We all know how hard sales is. Sometimes you got to figure out how to make sure that your product's being maximized. Got to have good attention to detail, right? You got to be technical, but you also got to be biz savvy. And we say that this solution leads the prospect or customers through a process to find a way to resolve their problems or improve their efficiency with a product or platform. Because I like to call this a customer-centric problem solver. That's when people ask me about this job. I say it's a customer-centric problem solver. Feels a little buzzwordy, but I hate like when people, oh, it's the technical person, right? The reality is like that puts them in a box for sure. And we want to, again, continue to focus on solutions consultant, solutions engineer, solutions architect, and some organizations are using this word called solution specialists. It is very interesting time right now in the solutions world, right? Like that's the reality of what this role in this profession should be called. And you might know some people that you've worked with, for those who answered yes, they're just great storytellers. This is actually an article from Wall Street Journal recently that just talked about the power of our new pop myths, like why we all keep watching Marvel for the 400th time. We've watched every movie. There's like 75 Star Wars now. You know, the Harry Potter sagas continue. Like, why do we keep watching them? Like, why do we keep yearning for more? It's because they've all become absolutely incredible at storytelling and captivating audiences to make them feel affinity, right? And sometimes your sales engineers, they're really, really good at that with your product. And last slide for you, as we talk about the shift, right? The shift is that this role goes from like support resource, demo jockey, very reactive, order taker to a co-pilot, an enabler, proactive, a strategic asset. Because again, sales is hard, right? The best SEs understand that, and they understand how they can play their role in driving revenue, which we're going to talk about momentarily in the shift and really why you should care about the shift. But I'm going to pause there. Are there any specific questions? Either off mute or via chat? Okay. It's a GT4 shifter, if anyone noticed. Gotta love Porsche.
Car dork.
Hey, I'm a SC, attention to detail there, right? So Sean Whiteley, I don't know if anyone knows Sean Whiteley from qualified.com. I had the pleasure of getting to know Sean through a PreSales Collective event 2 years ago. He was actually one of our keynote speakers, and he said this thing to me that I just can't shake. I just can't shake it. He says Uber and Amazon have changed the concept of speed and personalization for all of us. And if you think about this, you don't call an Uber unless you're scheduling it and wait 2 hours for it to come pick you up. It's instantaneous, right? I don't know about you, but sometimes I don't go to the grocery store because I know that my toothpaste is going to get delivered from Amazon tomorrow. Sometimes I buy things at 8 o'clock at night and it's at my front door at 5 a.m. It's just changed the concept of speed and personalization for all of us. And this is a very B2C trend, but the reality is that the B2C trends are affecting B2B. And you may have heard this before, but this is why this role is so important. This is like a crazy statistic that happened. I know it's during the pandemic, but in 2020, 63% of home buyers made an offer sight unseen on a house. They did their research online, they called, they did whatever it is and made an offer. And then that's kind of balanced out over the last 2 years, but 47% of home buyers made an offer in the last 2 years without physically touring a property. That is a massive shift in consumer behaviors. And the reason why this is so important is that the consumer behaviors are actually bleeding into B2B, which I'll get into momentarily. But 84% of people, according to Salesforce's State of Marketing report, say that the experience a company provides is as important as its product and services. That means you could have better product and still lose deals because of the experience. And what does this actually mean? I mean, we've seen this before, is the sales process is changing, right? A lot. Sales process, buying journey. This is how we tend to think about a sales process, prospect, contact, qualify, nurture, there's some details in between, but the reality on the data is that that's only 30%, right? It's a little bit back and forth depending on whose research you're reading. Like some are actually even lower than this, but people are doing their own research ahead of time. They're downloading free trials. They're doing third-party analysis. They're on G2, Gartner, Forrester. I mean, even Reddit forums. People are doing all this work ahead of time, and it changes the buying cycle, right? It changes your job as a seller on the day to day. So that makes this 30% even more impactful. And a recent stat that I saw that only 7% of a buyer's time is actually spent with external vendors. And that's all external vendors. That is not just you.
Did you say seven?
Seven,
7%?
single seven.
Wow.
And that means that like your interaction with this customer has to be freaking perfect, right? Like it's like the expectations are so high on the experience. And that's why Salesforce talks about the experience being more important than the actual product. And, you know, don't shoot the messenger on this, but like the data is showing right now that buying and selling is changing because sales is a little bit broken. And unfortunately, some bad behaviors, I think, over the last decade are kind of coming to fruition now because 48% of people won't buy from sellers who provide misleading information. And if you look at like the 6 killers of deals, it's from the 2021 State of Sales report from LinkedIn. This is like one of my favorite things to quote right now over the last year is 48% of people won't buy if you mislead on price. If 44% is if you don't understand my company and its needs, you don't even understand your own product or services. Like these are an issue, right? You've probably seen these, so I don't want to harp on them too much, but there's just so much pressure on salespeople to perform and to execute and be on top of your game. And this is the most telling statistic, if you ask me. 65% of sellers say that they always put the buyer first, but only 23% of buyers agree with that, right? So there's a massive issue here that buyers who are buying on experience don't feel, 3 out of 4 of them do not feel that the sales team is putting them first, right? Is that putting their needs first? And that's an issue because somebody else is. And again, you might have superior product, but someone else is running a better process. That's going to leave you, not closing a deal. And if you look at like why people are not buying, it's a lot of this word trust, right? Only this is like this alarming statistic about sales and just scares me for the future. Is like 40% of buyers say that sales people are trustworthy. Like that's really alarming, and it just means that there's been some bad behavior in the past that have kind of altered where we're at. But at the same time, 89% of buyers describe salesperson that they do business with as a trusted advisor, right? So we're talking about trust. And the survey also shows that why people buy are trust in brand, trust in relationship, price, ROI, and services. So why am I talking about trust and talking about sales? Well, sales is changing, right? Your job is getting harder than ever. And what started as like a very B2B sales process is kind of bleeding into B2C. And what was former, like you got to do 4 discos before, we talk about product. People are getting products on the website, right? They're doing free trials. They're seeing products like Reprise, DemoStack, Walnut on the website, Novatic. Videos, microsites are more important than emails, SMS, slides, and LinkedIn. And
there's another one out there called Trumpet that you're about to hear about.
Trumpet?
Yeah, based in the UK, and they have landed major deals with big enterprise organizations. So it's just another signal that this stuff is top of mind for investors and buyers.
It is, right? Because again, like to this last point, it used to be a single person who can make a buying decision for an entire organization, even in like mostly in a large enterprise business unit. But nowadays the buying teams just add up and add up and add up, and you got to get so much consensus. It's crazy, right? It really is crazy. So we're asking you as salespeople to do all these things, right? To outbound, to disco, to demo. So team selling is really, really important, and sales has never been harder. And so I want to talk about solutions. Again, I want to talk about the solutions role, the solutions consultant, because this is really what I believe is the future of sales, right? Like you need to have support as an account executive to do your job, right? To be able to do all the things that we're asking of you. And this is a pretty awesome slide about the battleground for trust. It talks about like what led to trust gain and what led to trust loss. And if you look at trust gain, it's personal experience and peer conversations, right? Like people want to talk to people about their experience and they want to know that you understand them. And if you look at trust lost, it's 2 of the same, right? It's actually all 3 the same. But the peer conversations and earned media are right, or excuse me, personal experience and peer conversations are right there. And so it just shows that trust can be a double-edged sword. And as we talked about, and even some examples from the sales folks on Scott's post today, salespeople can say the same thing as an SC, and sometimes people are like, oh, it's a salesperson, I don't know if I should trust them. And it's just a shame that that's what today's environment looks like. But influence is built through authority and empathy is the title of this slide, because industry experts, I mean, it really helps you have a credible voice. When I worked at Salesforce, I was a director of SC for manufacturing and commercial manufacturing. I had a woman on my team. She was in her mid to late 20s, and she used to work for Cummins. And we walked into every meeting with every middle-aged white guy wearing a blue shirt every single time. And she walked into that meeting and was like, I worked at Cummins. I ran this type of P&L. I did A, B, C, and D. You need to listen to me. And it worked. It absolutely worked. It was unbelievable. And right, she was able to build credibility right then and there because we met with industry experts. Because in SaaS, we're like, oh, I spent 3 or 4 years at a company. We worked with people during the pandemic who've been 30, 40 years at a company, right? And then that brand technical expert, right? Understanding your brand, understanding what your company can do, understanding the profession, the industry. That's what we talk about, customer-centric problem solver. These things help build trust. And that is why this role is so important, because trust unlocks deeper relationships. And we've already talked about the mistrust with salespeople. Whether you want to believe it or not, it's just the reality of what's happened over the past 5 to 10 years. And so co-selling and team selling is more important than ever, because having those multiple bodies will allow you to navigate through a deal, right? And if you look at the data on trust, 7 times more willing to pay premiums, 7 times more willing to share data, 6 times more loyal, more advocacy. You can see the information here. And that's why we say insert the solutions organization. This is an article that I wrote for Crunchbase about the secret weapon in customer experience. So I'll pause there before I start shifting into some details of the modern sales org, pre-sales org. Any questions? I see a couple comments in here.
I've got a question maybe while other people think or talk. So my experience, my background, I build sales orgs more or less from scratch, right? How do I know when the right time is to bring in that hire? Like, do I bring in that hire first? Do I bring in a couple AEs first?
Yeah.
Do I have to get to 3 or 4 AEs and an SDR and an ops person and know that I can sell this shit and then bring in that person? Like, where does that fit into the scaling kind of hierarchy?
Yeah. This is something that we're trying to put out some education on, because my personal opinion is you should hire your salespeople first. Look at one, even if you have 1 SDR, 2 reps, and get an SC at that point, right? There's just going to be a lot of knocking on doors and a lot of emails and a lot of conversations where you got to put your best foot forward. And if you're just kind of smiling and dialing and pick up the phone transactionally, it's really hard to gain traction. A lot of times when organizations start, the first SC helps with demos in the enterprise. Maybe they do proof of concepts, right? They talk about how the product fits in the tech stack. I mentioned that my background is in education. Like, I don't have a technical background at all, but I understood ecosystem, and I would get on calls and proof of concepts and talk about how our product fit in that stack and how it could provide value at the end of the day. And so this is what we believe, again, is something that's really important early on in organizations, but this doesn't actually happen. Like, what happens now is you probably hire like 10 to 20 salespeople and BDRs, and then you're like, oh, we need an SC. And then we overload somebody and give them a very linear work stream, and they get overwhelmed very easily. And that's just the reality of where this profession has been. And again, this is why Pre-Sales Collective's out to help create an ecosystem and educate folks on that. Does that answer your question, Scott?
It does, yeah, 100%. Thank you. What about how do you position? Help me pitch it, because I think that I was typing notes over here. I'm imagining the conversation. I'm a VP of sales. I'm in pretty early. I go talk to my CEO. I go talk to my boss. and the CFO, and here's what happens, and I would suspect you agree with me that this happens. They just view it as a cost center.
Oh, I knew you were going to go there.
You know what I mean? They're like, wait a second, I gotta pay another person a decent chunk of change. My customer acquisition cost just went up 100 and fucking whatever grand, right? Like,
yep.
How do I pitch that? Like, help me pitch that.
Yeah. I actually thought I had both on here. I have "This is why your SC is your co-pilot." My other post that did pretty well, about 150,000, I think, on LinkedIn, which is good for me, was about SC as a cost center, right? Because the reality is that, like, this is a massive conversation that's happening in the profession right now. And unfortunately, Scott, I don't have a good answer right now, but this is what I'm trying to solve, is that most organizations look at this as a cost center. But if you ask anyone in the role, they're like, no, of course it's a revenue driver. But this is where there's issues in the profession, is some folks say, all right, if you want to prove the value, put a quota on this person and look at the quotas. But the reality is this person does a lot more than just this person does a lot more than just being on revenue calls. A lot of times you're working with product, you're working with marketing. And so, like, this is what we're trying to solve. I put out some content that made some people mad by talking about justifying our existence. And they're like, what do you mean justifying? But I'm like, the reality is,
that's right.
You can't walk into that room, Scott, like you just said, and say, this is how you quantify the impact of this profession. It doesn't exist, which is baffling to me, which is why I and the PreSales Collective are trying to solve this, because it's, again, we're pretty early stages in this.
Which is also why, like, you're being very candid. You're like, I don't have a perfect answer. I don't have the perfect rebuttal yet.
Yeah,
because
I'm working on it.
It's a motherfucker to, like, have that conversation, and I know, because I know how hard it is to have those kind of conversations, even outside of this role. So it's a challenge. Okay.
You know what? And Scott, it's funny. You know, I actually presented today a bit on imposter syndrome, right, to our foundations program. We had our first foundations program launched today. And, you know, I'm like, who am I? Like, I've managed like 13, 14 people to be leading PreSales Collective and talk about, you know, what great looks like. But I'm not going to lie. I get people who've been in this profession for 20 years that reach out to me and asking for my advice on how they do things. And I used to be like, how do you not know this? But what I've realized, right, is this profession has just kind of existed and just kind of, I don't want to use the word like slugged along, but that's just the reality of it. So it's got to get with modern times. And in our thesis, right, is like, it's got to get alignment on, like, what is the role? What is the title? What are these people even responsible for? And once we can start defining those things, we can start quantifying impact on organizations. And then we start getting into early stage organizations who implement these types of things, and we see what the ROI and the impact is. And then we bring them to scale, because that's the benefit of having a giant platform like the PreSales Collective.
Yeah.
James,
I'm going to go ahead, John. Go ahead, John.
Just to make a brief comment, a lot of this depends on the complexity of the sale, the complexity of the product, and the stage of the company. So in the early days, I often encourage startups to pick somebody that's essentially an SE / product manager / that type of skill set. So your salesperson is managing the politics of the sale, the process of the sale, the complexity of the sale at all levels, involving the right people, making sure things are moving along. But at some point, especially in B2B SaaS, you know, the old days, they're signing one big deal. That's a massive contract for $1.5 million. Today, it's like, we'd like to do a proof of concept, 10 seats in this department. And oh, by the way, it's got to do this, this, and this. Your salespeople, I'm a strong believer that I like technical salespeople that can at least do a solid demo. But I don't want them getting into the weeds much beyond that in a proof of concept. It's kind of a waste of that resource. Agreed. So as an overlay, I take a look, I want an SE. It's not going to be a one-to-one relationship. It's probably 1 to 3, 1 to 4, you know, depending on the company. And that person is going to handle those deals, the technical part, build those relationships, and help get across that last 10% so that proof of concept or that pilot is successful and the deal closes, and then you can expand from there.
I appreciate that feedback, John. I love that. And it's actually, that's actually how I built justification of my first SE team at Showpad. We just did POCs all day long, and that's how I was able to build the ROI, is I just took on the POCs while the AEs did demos, and we were able to quantify the impact versus our competitors. So great feedback.
I want to go to Carolyn for a second. Carolyn, can you take yourself off mute? She's got a question for you, James.
Yeah, thanks, James. So one of the things that we've kind of learned in our organization about the right level of compassion, understanding, empathy for a solution consultant is to partner them with the practitioner of the service we offer. So if we're selling into an AP team, as an example, we're aligning the solution consultant, sitting them in an AP team for, a day, a week, and a month in the life of the AP practitioner so that they can learn what the typical pain points are there. And that helps us align better with really where our solution is actually solving problems. And we get away from more pitchiness in sales to more a technical know-how without coming across as pitchy. Do you advocate for that type of growth learning in the solution consultant, solution engineering role? Or
Yeah, Carolyn, thanks for bringing that up. I personally think that approach works best. As I mentioned, like, let me reflect back on my experience at Salesforce. I was selling to manufacturing folks who had like 30, 40, 50 years of tenure. So us walking in the door and saying that we worked at Salesforce, they didn't fucking care. They would laugh at us. We were trying to push, I know I'm being recorded, right? We're trying to push Salesforce and be like, it's a COVID, it's a pandemic. And they would be like, we have survived the Great Recession. We do not care about this pandemic right now. Like, we have been through it all. Your, product right now, it will be here after your quarter closes in March or April, right? So I realized that, like, wow, I need to change my approach to the hiring profile. So I tried searching for people who actually worked in manufacturing and would teach them the role because they got the subject matter expertise. And as I reflect on my own experience, when I joined Revinate, I was one of the only people in that company who actually worked in a hotel. And that baffled me, but it allowed my career to just skyrocket.
Right.
Because I could walk into a room and I was a hotelier, so I could speak to it. And even our product was built in a way that I was like, hotel people don't actually use things like this. Like, we should change it. And I think that subject matter expertise is very important. And as you mentioned, like, that's why I always bank on the SME. Like, I tell people all the time, like, I fell into this profession because I followed what I was good at, right? And it was able to build credibility in a call. And if you think about that, like, as you mentioned, getting away from the pitchiness, it's about being, again, customer-centric problem solver. If you can go in there and be like, I know what it's like to be in your shoes. I understand your industry. I understand your problems. I understand what you're going through. Let me tell you how our solution can help that. I think it's the future of sales, right? We talk about people who are trustworthy. There's issues, even if you say something that's truthful, people sometimes are reserved and say, oh, I don't know if that's actually true. And that's the role of the SE, is to break down that barrier and build that trust with the customer. And I think, to your point, like, that practitioner model is super important. And even that's why, last thing I'll say is, on PreSales Collective and PreSales Academy, we're trying to get folks into the profession, because we're like, just because you don't have these, you apply to a job that says you need 10 years experience, graduate from a great college, it's just ridiculous. But if you worked in manufacturing, you work in hospitality, you would be a better fit as an SC in some of these organizations and some of these customers.
That's good. That's good content right there. You could write all about that. If you work in these industries, you'd be a better fit.
It helps with discovery too, right, Scott? Like,
yeah.
And James, if you understand their day in the life, you can ask questions, hopefully leading questions that lead to their real pain points. And I don't know, we've changed the way we hire solution consultants and engineers, not to necessarily hire into that historical role that we're, trying to solve problems for, but for folks who are naturally curious, as you mentioned, James, that are willing to go learn and live a life in the day of the people they're trying to sell to.
Yeah. I love that perspective. I'm happy you're taking that approach. I mean, I think it's important.
I want to change direction for a second and pick on my friend Emma, who said she walked into this having no idea what pre-sales was, and now she wonders if she is one. Can you explain what you mean by that? And maybe you and James can have a little chat about that.
Yeah, I was thinking, my background is I'm a physical therapist and I sell physical therapy software to physical therapy clinics. So I do get pulled into calls all the time to do demos of certain parts of the system that my teammates, it would be very challenging for them to truly understand what it is without that background.
How big is your company?
We are about 50, or my sales team.
The company, 50. And how big's the sales team?
There's 3 AEs and 1 BDR.
You're an SC. So if you're, you should actually be proud because you're a bit of that hybrid. But that's actually how this role a lot of times starts, is that you're kind of carrying the quota, you're selling deals, but you're doing all these things that build continuity with your customers. You understand what day in the life is, and you can actually demonstrate the value, and you hold more subject matter expertise than maybe some of your other sales peers. And so a lot of times, like as your team expands, if your sales leader has experience running SC teams or SC teams, they might come to you and say, Emma, you would be a great fit in this role. And you just have to ask yourself, like, do you want to carry the bag? Because that's really the main difference in the role, especially early stage.
We got a couple other questions here, James, before you get back to your presentation.
Yeah.
Elise,
actually, Scott, would you be okay if I went through this next section? Because I see that there's some questions about the role, and I'm actually going to talk about like what this role should be, and then we roll the questions.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, bring on the questions, please. I love it. So, as a refresher, right? I talked about the shift, right? This role is shifting from sales support, demo jockey, reactive order taker to a true co-pilot, right? To as Brian, like bringing in the SC to help you in your deal is massively important and massively critical. Because again, sales is hard. There's a lot of things being asked of you. And if you can give a couple things to that individual to help with deal strategy, demo, value orientation, aligning with a technical or a business manager, it's very helpful. And this is why we believe that sales is the co-pilot. This is like something that I like to talk about all the time, is that it's not a support resource, right? It can't be viewed as a support resource because the job affinity is not there. Right. A lot of the data and the stats that are in here are things that I've already talked about today. So as you can assume, I talk about this all the time, but the best sales professionals understand how to unlock the superpowers of this role in this profession and achieving revenue goals. Again, I am the first to say I've never carried a bag, but I feel like I understand how hard it is for salespeople. We just ask so much of you, put so much pressure on you, ask you to do so much. The reality is you're not capable. Nobody's capable of doing everything that's always asked of them. So I like to think, 2 heads are better than one, separating responsibilities so that you can be experts, right? Imagine that your list goes from 10 things to 6 things. And the best sales executives understand this, and they understand the importance of a co-selling model. And there's some organizations out there that just don't get it, right? So we're trying to bring more awareness to them. And one of the things that is like really growing with this profession, right, is product-led growth, product-led sales. You're starting to see a lot of these motions of products on the websites, product tours on the websites. Well, that sales function or that sale is much different, right? And that's where this role can really play an impact and play a role. I have some pretty out there thoughts on the future of PLG organizations, where I actually believe the SC should be the first touch point. But you're starting to see this come up in more organizations, right? People are trying to figure this out. And this is kind of the current duties of a sales engineer or solutions consultant in a big organization, right? Like they're doing a comp planning. Sometimes they're doing competitive intelligence, demo building, product pitching. Oh, you can see the list here. But the reality is that specialty and solutions is actually the future. So I've been talking about getting one person to support you. At companies like Salesforce and ServiceNow, they have almost 2 SCs to 1 AE in some of their business lines because they have people that are specialized that can help you, right? Because Brian, like you own the relationship. That is the most important aspect, is you're owning the relationship, owning the strategy, driving where you send the resources. And your SC, should be able to go and speak to, the CTO and build credibility, right? And be a technical and business expert. Maybe you have a solutions architect. That's a secondary role that goes and works with the product owner to map about how this role fits in the accounts. And again, you're starting to see this like specialty happen in solutions where you have generalists and specialists, but the reality is these people are here to support you in your day-to-day. Because like you said, Brian, you don't want to do the details, like let an expert, like even the SC, this person may not want to go and build custom demos. And so some of the best things you could do is build a custom demo engineering team that goes and creates specialty products that support the SE and support the account executive. And so, there's a couple things I just want to highlight here to end. This is actually taken from my friends over at Consensus and Salesforce. Is like, even when you talk about demos and what this role is, there are multiple types of demos. And this is a document that we like to talk about, like the 6 demo types. Right? There are things like vision demos and painting the picture of art of the possible. There's micro demos that you maybe need to give to an administrator to talk about what things actually look like. There's qualifying demos, right? To make sure that someone's actually this product does what they need it to do. There's solutions, which are customized, and there's closing, right? Sometimes I tell people all the time, if you're pitching to the executive of a company who's the decision maker, they do not give a shit about how you click button A to get to button B. They do not care about that. You need to sell value and say how their life will be easier. And you can see though that like the sales process, as we talked about earlier, right? In the own sales process, sometimes that if you only have 30% of their time, they might be 55% through that sales cycle before a solutions individual even gets involved, right? Before they even get involved. And like they have all this knowledge. And so how do organizations start bringing it earlier in the sales cycle? How do you use automation? How do you use products? How do you unlock this role, to some of Scott's questions about when do I bring this in my function? Well, if this role can actually help with marketing qualified leads, can help BDRs in enablement, can help AEs on qualification, can actually get to those things that happen to qualify in and qualify out earlier, it's important, right? And what if the prospect never even gets to the demo, right? Because you haven't utilized this person's resource of disco, demo, value, or architecture. And this is why my last 2 slides, right? Garen Hess, who's the CEO and founder of Consensus, I read his book, Selling is Hard, Buying is Harder. And what he talks about, right, is how buyer enablement is this new approach, right? Where you start getting all the stakeholders involved very early in the sales process, getting your SC involved very early in month 1, so you can make sure you're tailoring your products, tailoring your conversations, instead of the historic, like here's contact 1, here's stakeholder 1, here's stakeholder 2, right? And then it's 4 months in and your CFO gets involved. Like, let's figure out ways to utilize the solutions team to go up in the organization and then help you close deals faster. And the last slide I have is maximizing solutions, right? This role, you've heard a lot today, and you might be walking away with like, this is great. I understand what it is, but there still might be ambiguity. But know that like even people who've been in this role, in this profession for 20 or 30 years feel the same way. And this is what we're aiming to do, because solutions teams, the solutions org, as I like to call it, are at the center of influence, both internally and externally, right? We work with so many teams. And to Scott's question earlier, like, how do you quantify the impact? Well, that's great if you're only supporting sales, but I will tell you that I did product marketing content. I did webinars. I met with the product team on a bi-weekly basis about product strategy and what deals need to get done. I mean, there's so many different factors of this role that I do feel like we're still in the early stages of what great looks like, but the best organizations understand that this role is important and figure out ways to utilize it early. So that's what I've got today. I know we got some questions, so thanks for letting me go through those last couple sections before we get there. So I think Elise, you're up.
Yeah, Elise, you're up.
Awesome. All right. So I have a fairly limited perspective, but my last company, the solutions consultants were mapped to 3 AEs.
Yeah.
Their quota was tied to the AE's quota. So if the AEs hit quota, they hit their own, right?
Yep.
Company I'm at right now, they're not called solutions consultants, they're called solution engineers. They're not tied to quota. And their roles and responsibilities are pretty different, having friends like in both roles at both companies. And one thing that a solutions consultant told me was like, hey, listen, like every company, you need to think about how technical the product is and who they're selling to. That some solutions consultants like essentially should have a computer science degree, something like this, because they're selling a very technical product, like CIOs, for example. And then other companies and products, they have a very light lift in terms of technical prowess, right? So curious, I'm an SDR considering moving in this direction, and like, what kind of companies should you be looking at? Like, what kind of things are green flags, red flags, and like, oh, this company like doesn't know what this role is, or like, yeah, this is a good place to like be this at, right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks for asking that question. You know, I think a lot of historic companies will say, well, yeah, our audience is really technical. You need to be an engineer. Well, I will tell you that a CIO or a CTO probably hasn't put their hands on a keyboard in a long time. And so you have to be business savvy and you have to be technical at the same time to speak to those folks. And so anyone who tells you you absolutely need an engineering degree to get into a company, those are companies you should stay away from, because I think that they're probably still stuck in the historical mindset. Because again, as we talked about sales and the multiple teams that are buyers, multiple buying people that are on a buying team, that changes things. I would say that, and again, I'm not trying to plug the PreSales Collective. I want to be mindful of that. But one of the best things about what we do is that you can talk to people at different companies, right? So, you can say, you could join a webinar or be in the Slack and hear how companies are approaching the problem. I will tell you that we just had a massive conversation a couple weeks ago about a company who said that they pulled all the SCs out of President's Club and nobody went to President's Club this year, and they were not going to let SCs involved in President's Club any further. And
that didn't go over very well.
Well, she actually, unfortunately, was just like, okay, that sucks. And then so literally 30 people responded like, absolutely not. You've already got a seat at the table. These are the things you should be doing and justifying. And she actually came back to us and said, thanks everybody for the community for saying this, because we got our seats back at Pres Club. Companies that are, again, this is not a perfect answer, but that are out there on social that you could reach out to say, hey, what's your role like? What's your day to life and the like? Anyone who treats it like a real co-pilot and actually, includes you in spiffs and includes you in variable compensation and allows you to go over 100%. Those are companies that you want to work for, right? If you ask somebody what the day in the life is and they tell you that they're doing 9 demos a day, which someone I interviewed told me, I was like, that job sucks. I would probably have already quit, right? Like that is not fun, like that type of job doesn't have a lot of affinity. But the reality is you're probably going to have to talk to people at these companies to understand what day in the life actually is. Because I think a lot of folks right now are, and I want to be mindful about how I say this, right? But everyone's fighting for talent right now. So
it's a talent war. It's a talent war is what it is.
It's a talent war, but some people are just bullshitting what it's like to work at their company, right? And the reality is just like we talked about trust, you have to go talk to people who work at those companies to understand what it's actually like. But I will say that sometimes teams are different, orgs are different, right? I worked at Salesforce, great company to work for, but the SE team was very different in manufacturing than maybe retail, right? Versus SMB and enterprise. So I'm sorry to give you a long answer, but the reality is that if anyone's telling you have to have, certain type of qualifications, you have to have been in school a certain amount of time, you need a certain amount of experience, those are companies to stay away from. And if you see people that are talking about their companies and are willing to share their experience, those are places I would look for sure.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Sweet. All right, Brian, let's go to you, man.
Yeah, between Carolyn and James, I think we sort of answered this question on how you approach salespeople and the sales team. Once the VP of sales decides with the CEO or whoever that, SC is going to be involved, how do you start that conversation with salespeople? And you kind of answered it a little bit, but if you want to expand, that's totally fine. But also it's it sort of seems between AEs, SDRs, BDRs, all these parts of the sales, we're adding new people to the mix. When does the revenue get squeezed too much? When does that become too front end heavy of a cost structure to make sense for the company to employ?
I think it's a very fair question, right? And one that, as we kind of mentioned earlier, that we're trying to figure out. I would say that if you're in an early stage company, it's worth investing in this role because they're going to be a person who wears multiple hats. I will tell you, at an early stage startup, you need help with sales. You need to help enable your sales folks. You need to help enable your BDRs. There needs to be post-sales support. there's a lot of times a disconnect between product marketing and sales and the product team, right? So like that right there can be a lot to have a conversation about, that this person is kind of the jack of all trades, master of none. But this is, again, what we're trying to figure out. But the reality is if you look at this role as a revenue driver and having impact on the bottom line, if you insert it into the sales cycle and you see that your ASPs are improving, your days to close are decreasing, and you're able to increase velocity on number of calls, deals, that right there should be able to be an indicator of like, this role is making impact on the business. And at the end of the day, that's what it is about like supporting sales velocity to be able to close revenue at a quicker pace. Does that answer your question, Brian? I know that's a bit ambiguous.
Yeah, no, I think it does. And it makes a lot of sense. I think you use the words that make sense to like the salespeople and the sales team, like sales velocity and all that stuff. If we can grow, if we can, make that faster and do those things that you're talking about, that does make a lot of sense in order to show the value of an SC and how that can change an organization.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can show, like as salespeople, we can show, hey, we're spending X less time on these activities than we were doing before. And we're able to prospect or work with our clients more, or help them close more, help them see the value more. So, if we're showing that we can save X amount of hours just based on the SC helping us out, that makes a big case for what we can do within the organization.
Absolutely. And, I haven't really gotten into it a lot, but, SC's viewpoint on deals is really important, actually, because most of the time they're a little bit more risk adverse and they're a little bit more conservative. And so like SC confidence scores are things that I've utilized in my career, where AE might be committing a deal and the SC's like, there's no way this is going to close, right? I have actually experienced where I was on a call at Salesforce with like some very senior people, and there was about 150 sales leaders on that call. And I knew this deal wasn't a close. And the SAVP asked me my opinion on the deal. And I was like, in front of all these people, am I going to throw my RVP under the bus right now or what? But it's the reality. Like that deal pushed like 7 times, right? Like it wasn't actually going to close. And sometimes the middle ground is there. But last thing I'll say on a tactical perspective, when I was at Showpad, I implemented this entire system in Salesforce around like tracking deals, right? Tracking activities. And then we would throw it in Tableau. And I used to be able to tell you which reps moved most deals from stage 0 to stage 1 without closing, right? Or stage 1 to stage 3 without closing, or how many deal pushes. And like that type of impact and numbers, I used to be able to go to my sales leader, because I'm also trying to justify my impact, to be like, Ben is doing too many demos in stage 2 that aren't closing. Like we need to fix this. And that's where you can start to make a little bit more of an impact, because I mean, we look at sales reports, right? But like the SC reports are definitely looked at with a different lens. Carolyn just mentioned the RFP library. Definitely a great point. A lot of times when folks are starting in the profession, POCs, RFP, security questionnaires, I got to be honest, it's a rough job. Just answering RFPs and security questionnaires all day. I will tell you that at my time at Showpad, GDPR came out, and I am not a technical expert whatsoever, but I had to learn everything that I could. And those were some tough conversations for sure. Yes, they do, John. I agree.
Oh my God. Can you do another one of those QR code polls? How many of you have gone through an RFP process and like,
oh,
Jesus Christ, this is the most painful shit ever.
Yeah, I'll never forget that a really big company did RFPs.
Name names, James. God.
So FedEx sent
us there we go.
600 question RFP.
600 questions. 600.
Gave us a week. 600, and they made us do it in Ariba. So we had to like go into Ariba and not be able to export it and just sit there and answer the questions that open dependents. And a couple of times we're like, they're not going to follow up. They followed up on almost everything. It was probably my worst RFP experience ever. Still have nightmares about it, because in Ariba you can't export it. Well, at least at the time. You couldn't export it and like import it back in.
Ooh, 600 questions. Do you have any idea how many that is? I'm having heart palpitations just thinking about it.
Yeah, we'll never forget that one.
Go ahead, John. Go ahead, John.
I got to tell you just one quick story. Sometimes you got to really push back on an RFP. I ran sales and marketing for a startup where every deal was an RFP, and they were costing us each one time and materials $40,000 to $50,000 to finish. And when I got there, that's all they did is we had an RFP department. That's all they're doing is turn out RFPs, and they hadn't closed a deal in 18 months. And we were running out of cash, by the way, which makes it real interesting. So I started a new thing, is no more RFPs. And the sales team just went apoplectic. Mm-hmm. But then I came back and said, okay, let me help you understand what I mean. No, we don't do any more RFPs until the decision maker, an SVP or up, looks the rep in me in the eye and says, we are either number one or number two in the deal. Because if we're not, we're just column fodder and we're wasting our time. And we're just helping them fill out their team that they did their research. So you do have ways in leadership to push back on the RFP process to at least make sure you're in the deal.
John, you're bringing back some nightmares here. I would say as an SC, this is one of the hardest things to be able to push back on, right? Because leaders are like, no, we're filling this out. When I was at Chopin, one of our competitors would get to people before us and put them in RFP, except they put them in the RFP was the same every time. And so my team knew the questions. And so when we got the RFP, we were like, this was already built by the other company. We're not filling it out. And so we got an agreement with the sales leaders that if anybody actually wanted to fill out the RFP, the sales team had to do it versus the SE team. We never won one of those deals, ever. Any other questions I can answer? Otherwise, I have just a takeaway slide.
Let's go to the takeaway slide and put these people under the pressure cooker.
All right. Takeaways. All right. The solutions teams have many different names. You even heard me say, how many times did I call it SC? It's just one of these things that we're trying to fix in the profession, but they have many different names, but they all have the same objective: to solve customer problems through your technology, ideally through your technology, but that is their job. And B2C consumer behaviors are changing B2B sales processes. I know that some people don't agree with me on this, but the same person who's going to buy your software enterprise company is using Amazon and Uber, and it's going to change how they view things. Sales is harder than ever, and really it's due to a lot of broken trust, unfortunately, of the past decade or so. And solutions consultants should be the trusted resource, right? Utilize them to be that trusted advisor within your sales cycle. And they should be both business and technical, right? Business savvy and technical savvy. We have an article that's talking about the sliding scale of biz savvy and tech savvy, right? It's very important to the modern solutions consultant. And they should be your co-pilot, right? Like utilize them, utilize their strategy, understand if maybe they're risk adverse or maybe not as vocal, that sometimes like you can really realize how to unpack that relationship and find out that SEs can be they can have a superpower, right? To help you win deals and close business. Like that's really what it is at the end of the day. And I think the best organizations are starting to figure it out. And we're trying to help be on the forefront of educating folks and bringing more awareness to this ecosystem. And so I do have a next step for everybody. Hopefully you're okay with this.
QR code next step?
I should have done a QR code, pre-wrote something. Scott, I didn't go.
God, you're so lazy. Such little work.
I'd love for you to go to your favorite social channel, preferably LinkedIn, because that's the only one I'm on. But I would appreciate, over the next couple of days, if you wrote up a post with one thing you learned about solutions today, tag the PreSales Collective, tag me, tag Scott, throw some hashtags out there. We'll interact and respond, because I think one, it will help continue to raise awareness. And for me, I also want to make sure that we're helping educate folks and helping you learn and have some takeaways that ideally will help you have a better understanding of this profession in the future. So that's it from me, Scott. I really appreciate the time, everybody. Appreciate the interactions and the conversation. Happy to answer any other questions that folks have before we go.
This has really been great. I have one more question.
Sure.
I'm gonna milk this for the last few minutes that we've got you. I'm an AE. You're an SE. What do I do that drives you nuts, that pisses you off, that frustrates you? what are the things
Can I-
that, what is the advice you would give to an AE that's like, listen, don't do this. This pisses your
Yeah.
partner off so much.
I got a list, but no. I'm just
Okay, then pour yourself another fucking Milagro, James, and answer the question honestly.
Oh yeah, I'm always honest, for better or for worse, right? The reality is a lot of salespeople just throw shit over the fence and they don't have a point of view on it. And
Wait, what do you mean throw shit over the fence? Be very clear.
Okay, you have a deal that's probably not a deal. It's super unqualified, and you want to spend your time and energy trying to make something happen when reality is there's fucking nothing there, right? And that is what most SEs go nuts on. And when you're an SE and you're supporting 3 AEs and you have 1 AE that just continues to throw unqualified crap across the fence, think about where you're going to spend your time and energy. It's not with that person. Is that what you need? Was that what you wanted, Scott?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm looking for, because I think sometimes we're afraid to enter this dialogue of like, what do I do that pisses you off?
Yeah.
Right. And that goes for SDRs and AEs, or SEs and AEs, or sales managers and AEs, or CEOs and VPs. And so, you know, if I'm an AE, I want to know, like, what are the things that I'm doing or some other AEs are doing that piss you off?
Yeah.
That make you less willing to help me right away.
Sure. Agreed.
Right?
And I'll tell you, the flip side, Scott, is when a sales rep has a point of view, they've got their notes in order, they show up with a strategy, that goes a long way. Like SC like rolls into a call, they take things very seriously. They want to do a very good job. And if you don't set them up for success, it's going to be an issue. And like the best SEs I've ever worked with, like we just are like a symphony, right? We just are on those calls. We're flowing. I know when they're going to add a customer story and value. We've done the prep, right? Like for whatever reason, we want to talk about a hot button. Whatever reason in B2B sales, we've just forgotten how to do prep. If you go look at any artist, any band, anybody who's like a professional athletes, they just practice and practice and practice. Yet in B2B sales, we've decided that we don't need to practice anymore. Let's just continue to do as much as we can. And the reality is that if experience is weighing 85% of a decision, you have to be good at what you do. And the best sales reps have a point of view. They know how to co-sell. They know how to have deal strategy and prep. They know how to objective handle, and they understand how to unlock the best traits of the SC.
Any last questions, or should we get on out of here and let James get on with the rest of his evening? Brian's got one. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I got another one, if that's okay. I'm sort of thinking about like the process, you know, what does it look like? When does an AE bring on an SC? How does that happen? Especially from like the buyer's point of view. If we're thinking about it from their point of view, yes, we believe that an SC is a more trusted advisor, but from their point of view, it's another person from your company. So how do we insert that person at the right time in the right way to build the most trust and make a deal happen? And does an AE like only bring in that SC when he's struggling, when he or she is struggling, or is there a time where you should always bring an SC in? Sorry, there's a lot of questions.
No, it's all good.
Trying to understand the process involved in bringing that person in.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, talk about pet peeves. When you roll up to a meeting, the AE's like, here's my smart person. This is James. They're going to run the show. Like, you just killed your credibility, right? So happens all the time. Still.
Can you role play a little better intro?
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm gonna be Scott and James. Hey everyone, like Scott, welcome to today's call. I've been working with the team. We've done a great job here, but I'm gonna hand it over to James. James is gonna show you everything on the product. He's a smart person. He's gonna take it from here.
That's the wrong way to do it, you're saying.
Oh, absolutely. It happens all the time. I've worked with people who say like 3 words, and like, there's my smart person. They just sit in the room and they don't pay attention.
Yeah. Now give me the good version.
Good version. Usually give me a good version and I'll answer the.
I don't know how to do this, James. I'm asking you for advice.
I think it's recapping a meeting. It's having a point of view and mentioning that this person James is my solutions consultant. They are working hand in hand. They are customers. They are focused on you and your business and making sure that our technology is a fit to help you be able to do A, B, C, and D, right?
Okay.
Like
that is enough where I feel like I could riff and create a pitch and a script around it.
Sure.
But I couldn't necessarily do that before you did that.
Oh, wow. I appreciate that. So Brian, to answer your question, you know, there is some debate in the profession around this because a lot of times people don't want SCs on unqualified deals. But if you don't have the person on discovery or early on in the sales process, they get involved a little late and have to do catch up, which could require an extra technical discovery. It might mean another discovery call based off your salesperson's notes. Then you're right. They come in sometimes like, who is this person? Why are they entering in? I have changed philosophies. Like when I was at Showpad, I wanted to be involved in later. After my experience at Salesforce, I want to be in as early as possible, right? After that SDR qualification, I want to be involved. Even if like they're on product-led growth and using a demo on the website, I want to be the first touch point. And the reality is that person's there from day one. And if you establish their credibility and establish who they are and what they do, ideally, just based off what their job description is, they should be able to build rapport, right? They should be able to build that rapport. Again, you talked about like cost of sale earlier. Those types of things start to get figured out. But I'll tell you, the biggest and best companies in the world have their SCs involved from day one, right? And now they're starting to see technology and data that gets involved. Like our friends at Consensus have created the demo qualified lead. They've created this concept in this category that's helped Salesforce increase revenue in some of their businesses by 70%. Salesforce, right? I am being quoted because I do know this for a fact based off people at Consensus and Salesforce. Because what they've done is like introduce like video concepts and video data introduction in the beginning to understand if people are serious about the buying journey. And if they are, then the AE and the SCs approach that conversation and they're approaching at the right time with the right message to the right audience. And it's a very hard thing to do. And again, I still think we're in the early stages of this, but technology might be able to help this on like demo qualified lead and when to get involved. So if you're trying to build an audience and trying to build justification, I would start with as early as possible.
Let me just add to that one thing. You got to remember, a lot of us are living in a remote world. And if your communication and handoffs aren't perfect, which nobody's are, if you're going to err on the side of bringing them in early, because there's nothing worse than wasting a client's time by having them repeat shit that they've already told you. It pisses them off. You're wasting their time. It's disrespectful. So if you're going to err on bringing them in a little early, but make sure you and your SE are on the same page on how you're going to work together.
Yes.
So, I like it where the AE is orchestrating it. They're running the call. They're telling me if I'm the SE, what my role is going to be in that call. And we've rehearsed it enough where it's smooth and it looks polished and it looks professional to the client. And you'll work that out after the first couple of meetings. But in a remote first world, nothing makes you look worse than a shitty handoff.
Well said, John. Well said. And you can actually tell when teams aren't in lockstep, right? Let's talk about that practice. You can tell when they're fumbling on top of each other. Hey, go here, go here. This doesn't work. And actually, orchestration is a term that we use at Salesforce very commonly.
John, with one of the best quotes of the night, I just dumped in the chat. Turn that into content tomorrow, John. Nothing looks worse than a shitty handoff. Pretty good. James, bring us on out of here, man. We really appreciate you spending time with us. And this has been great. Honestly, one of the best presentations I think that we've had in the almost 60 episodes of Tequila Tuesday now. Tell people, how they can find you and leave everybody with some parting shots.
Yeah, I think how you can find me is on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I'll send my page and our company's page. But the reality is that, one, let me say thanks for joining today. I appreciate everyone's time and listen to my perspective on solutions, especially if you're not familiar with it, and those that will download the video. I hope you found something actionable out today. The reality is that sales is changing, and the best salespeople are going to get ahead of these trends and stay in front of things and realize that you don't have to go at it alone, right? Understanding that this role can help you close business and do a little bit less in your job to do better is an important aspect. And myself and the PreSales Collective, we're here to do more education on the market, to find what great looks like, and help be a leader in the ecosystem, because we fundamentally believe that there's a change that needs to happen in sales, and unlocking this role is one of the key indicators of success, in our opinion.
Awesome. Thanks for spending time with us, James. Everybody connect with and follow James. Check out the PreSales Collective as well as the Academy. Maybe even go through that course. And I know James and his group have some cool events coming up. So be sure to check those out and drop some posts and give James and the crew a shout out for spending some time with us. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks, Scott.